Boy, do we have an episode for you today. We've got Procreate updates to talk about. They've given us a statement on things to come. We've got a backlog of tutorials because we've had a week away in between our recording. So we've got lots to get through today. As always, my name is Joel, otherwise known as JoelCreate here on YouTube. And my co-host, as always, is the one and only James Julier. James, we had a break, didn't we? We recorded two back to back. So in between, you've had a week off. How was it? And how have you been?
It's been nice. We did a little family trip, caravan trip, to not quite Wales, but there's no point going into detail. If most of our viewers are not from the UK, then I'm not going to go into the minutiae of exactly where it is. But yeah, sort of further south. So that was a nice trip. We're sort of nearer the beach, which was nice. How about yourself? You've had a busy one?
Decorating, lots of decorating. Backdrop's all done now, all
Yeah.
nice and dark, and it's a very big contrast. I was just saying to you before we start recording, didn't we? That it's a big contrast what's going to be to the rest of the house. So I had my way in here, but it's a lot. We both agree it's a really nice color, and that's it. Really, just a lot of decorating since we moved in, tidying up. Just I feel like there's certain bits that are no longer like tasks anymore. They're and not chores. They're more like small things you want to try and achieve. It's kind of a weird way of you're changing mentality of like, well, I want to get the garden done. I just want to tidy up the lawn today or do something like that. So yeah, just lots of little tasks here and there, and now getting back into my Procreate routine again of recording content, both main channel, second channel, Patreon, and so on. So
Good.
Anyway, less of my blubbering because we've got a backlog of tutorials to get through. We've got two each, as always. If you want to get straight to the sort of main topic of this, I'll leave a timestamp in the description down below. But as always, we take a look through our tutorials that we've previously released. If you're new here, we both release Procreate tutorials weekly on our YouTube channels, as well as extra content on our Patreon. So I'm going to start with James's first in the doc. Let's just take a look. So which one came first? Was it the park bench or was it the treehouse? I believe it was the park bench.
The park bench, yes.
Let's roll with that then. This was a beautiful design. I want you to talk us through this lovely little peaceful scene.
I wanted to do a lake scene. I got it in my head. I wanted to do a lake, but I wanted to have at least a different focal point, something a little bit different. Probably hear my dogs in the background. I can apologize. I want to do something a little bit different. I want to continue the idea of having structures. And then sort of like a park bench seemed like an appropriate kind of thing to do, so people could imagine themselves sitting there taking in the view. It was a bit of a challenge to do something in a sort of geometric shape, but I struggle a little bit sometimes to plan around geometric forms. So that was the struggle of this image, is to find a way not just of creating it, but to make it simple so that you could do it in as few steps as possible. So I found a way of doing that, which I think worked out all right. Had it been slightly from the side or a different angle, it would have messed it all up. It was a relatively simple view in it, so I got away with it. But I enjoyed doing this one.
The palette's really nice as well. It's almost got like a bit of a sepia kind of layer on it, almost like where the colours are slightly quite warm for a sky and the hills. Yeah, in the background. And what I find really interesting is there's all this. The more we do these on a weekly basis, and obviously seeing your content prior to this anyway, in terms of the sketchway, I can see lots of small elements that you have done in previous tutorials that just come through, and it's just part of your natural way of filling out a scene. Exactly, like that sky scene hasn't got a ton of cloud in there, but obviously you're really good at doing like a full cloudy scene. This one here, you get a little bit of it just right in the distance. And then, of course, certain other things. We know what brush it is, guys. If you know what brush it is, you know what brush it is. But I can definitely tell there's some.
This was one where I actually branched out, so to speak, into new brushes. There's quite a few brushes in this one. There's the vintage brushes, the rad brush. There's the blimey! Now see, I should have wrote them all down. But there's people have to go and watch it. But there's a good selection of brushes in this one. I didn't just rely upon the rainforest brush. So I'm trying. I'm trying to find new ways of approaching this. I used the snow gum brush, the rainforest brush, the rad brush, and then there were some others in there as well. But yeah, a good mixture actually in this one.
Nice. So when you How much time do you think you spend on sort of picking different brushes for different sort of use cases, such as this one? Did it take a while to find the brushes you're after, or was it just, some people ask the same question, and a lot of the time for me it's just that you have an inkling as to certain brushes are just going to work in certain ways, or you've used them once or twice, so it's just a bit of muscle memory.
Yeah, well, I've used all of those brushes before. They're not new brushes. I do experiment. If there's something that just isn't being captured somehow with the brushes that I'm used to using, then I will try and find a new way of doing it. But all of the brushes featured in that one, I have used before in one capacity or another. But the rad brush, I think I made it work better in this one than I have when I've used it in the past. I think I did it a few years ago in like an autumn scene. I was trying to replicate or recreate like leaves on the ground, and it didn't quite work. But I think it works better for the leaves that are on the top left of this image in that kind of jagged, kind of, more angular forms in a way that the rainforest brush just wouldn't convey as well. So, yeah, I was quite happy with that one.
Favorite bit of this one before we move on to the next one is the tiny little bit of glow of the sun that just is on the very top edge of the park bench, and the glow expands just slightly beyond the kind of structure. It just sort of tips over the edge, showing how bright it is, just rebounding off the water. It makes it really pretty to look at, and as a whole you've got lots of blues, you've got some subtle greens and some yellows, and it kind of just brings in a whole palette together with that nice warm touch in the middle, which of course compared to previous weeks is something such as the lights from the cabin being on as well. You have that, not only the greens and the blues of the landscape, but also that one quite warm, bright, vibrant yellowy orange tone as well, just to really finish off the piece as well.
Yeah.
Which, talking about kind of structures and cabins, you've got your treehouse design, which is the one that was just released. So that was only a couple of days ago for us, start of September.
From now, yeah, it's on the Sunday, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, I mean, I've actually had a couple of comments. People are getting a little bit fed up of the cabins now. I've done quite a few tutorials with these kind of wood cabins in there. I think because I'm becoming a little bit too reliant upon them, I'm going to have to try and figure out a different kind of structure. I've done some other structures too, but yeah, I think this is the fourth tutorial now that's got the similar kind of aesthetic of a wood cabin with a warm glow. So I'm going to have to figure out another way of introducing structures that isn't just that form. But I've been wanting to do a kind of treehouse image for a while, and it was trying to figure out how to do it. I mean, I think logistically it's a little bit of a stretch to think that that wood cabin would be up a tree, but it doesn't matter. It's just the painting. I wanted to really make it look like a dwelling, without going kind of Lord of the Rings and kind of like an elvish, take on it. It is a bit more real world almost. But yeah, I enjoyed it. I think that it's a moodier color palette than perhaps some of my more recent tutorials. There's not a lot of color in it beyond the couple of colors that are in there, like kind of like a warm sky, and then otherwise it's quite grayed out really, by contrast to a lot of other recent images. So yeah, I think I might put a full stop on the wood cabins for now. I may return to them. They may come back with a vengeance at some point, but I need to do. I need to.
I'm
move
waiting
on.
for the snowy Christmas versions. The snowy Christmas versions will be back with an absolute bang. So just let's talk about that topic for a second, because I personally feel that when you're doing content that you simply want to draw and you make tutorials, a lot of the time there is a lot of kind of repetition in terms of you bring techniques through from one week to another, or a subject potentially. And then when you actually kind of get that tap on the shoulder to be like, all right, something new this week would be great.
Move on.
When you then start the next canvas, it's almost as if, to me anyway, and I want to see if you kind of agree, that sometimes it's almost as if something's missing because you've been doing that one thing in that main focal point. And for you, I think a lot of the time, these structures actually act as the subject rather than, say, for instance, like a person or anything like that. So do you think that's something that is going to come across your mind? Well, I guess we'll have to see next week, I guess.
We'll have to see. I haven't quite determined what I'm going to do yet, but I guess things like a park bench was an effort. It was a way of sort of branching into something. I've done a window, I've done a park bench recently. I'm going to have to think of a door, I guess. It's the obvious kind of next thing, perhaps, but we'll see. I don't know yet. Yet to be determined.
Fair enough. Fair enough. It'll be interesting to see how you get on for
Let's
next
move
week
on
then.
to your images now. So talk us through. You've
So
got a simpler one you've described as, before we came on camera, a simpler one, and then a more involved. I really love the. We'll get onto this one second, perhaps, but I really love the river one, which we're going to get onto in a moment.
Yeah, so we'll take a look at the banana one. That was a YouTube tutorial. So this year I ended up creating 2 paintbrushes that I've just really been enjoying. They're very almost oil paint like in their kind of uses.
Yeah.
And I've previously done an apple. I've already recorded a pumpkin in their similar kind of style for Patreon. In again using the paint brushes, and this is what I was just referring to a second ago of having a kind of style that you kind of run down for quite some time, but I try to spread it out. Again, being that I can sort of shoot a little bit further ahead, I can kind of say, well, you have done 3 or 4 kind of painting styles. Let's maybe spread them out across the months, maybe going forward. But this one came about for YouTube because, truth be told, I actually want to have like a full collection of fruits using that paint style, whether it's grapes next or anything like that. And a banana just fit. It's absolutely just sunk on YouTube this week, and that's fine. It's a 10 out of 10. If you know what a 10 out of 10 is, it's awful.
I've got a 10 out of 10 with my most recent one as well this week. So
I was about to say that makes me feel better, but
it's fair enough. I think it's a trend, so I wouldn't be too disheartened.
Well, maybe it's the time of year, kids going back to school, people being busy this weekend, or whatever it may be. Hopefully, this is an excuse that covers it. Hopefully, our work's not been that bad this week. But to be honest, I actually really like it, though. I don't see anything that I would say, oh, no, do you know what? They're probably right for not doing it. It's a bit of a stinker. But yeah, I like it. I want to have that full collection of all the fruits in it. And so, there'll be more to come in that style. But moving on to the second one, it's actually out tomorrow for us, but by the time people are watching this, it's already out. It's a landscape design with a stream running through quite a battered kind of forest. We've got a tree fallen over across the stream. Trees at angles, quite scarce as well. Branches are quite worn. There's not very much on them, so it could be quite a winter style scene, but it's not meant to necessarily have that kind of snowy look to it in any sense, but a stream coming through nonetheless. And yeah, this was a sort of a combination of a few different brushes that I've just been working with quite a lot. Leatherwood brush, Blackburn brush, I think it was, and there's another couple. And to be honest, because it's been recorded a while ago, I can't remember at all which brushes, but a little bit of soft air brush in there as well. But I was really happy with how the water came about, that kind of quite white, milky kind of look to it. So this is actually one of those tutorials where I was recording it and I actually gave myself some freedom to just do what I wanted to do. I drew the leaning tree that's sort of dying maybe a little bit, or the ground's a bit sort of worn and it's now leaning across the river. And then I thought to myself, well, actually, let's do something a bit more sort of messy in a sense by grabbing one of the trees, the one on the left-hand side, I think it was, laying it across the stream, adding some color to it to make it look like it's actually meant to be there, correctly fallen. And just, had some fun with it, just adding different elements that was never necessarily planned to do, but I was really happy with how it worked out. It's just, things come together sometimes, or you're in flow state, as we've said before, and just add certain bits as you go.
I really like the lower area, especially the rocks and the kind of the water area. It's almost got a kind of watercolor kind of feel to it. Have you used kind of watercolor brushes, or because it has somehow that effect?
I can't remember what. I cannot. No, but the thing is, it's kind of meant to have that aesthetic, though. The middle ground there with the forest, the blue forest in the background, where there are colors that are layered on top of each other to not point out trees necessarily or define trees, but give sort of a bit of different levels of brightness in terms of contrast, in there, just to maybe give the nod that the forest has different sort of depth to it, not just a flat plane like I would normally kind of do that looks very monoline and flat. And I cannot remember for the life of me what the brush was, but it has tried to lean that way in a very painting style. Yeah, for sure. Again, I'm really enjoying the fact of creating these kind of painting frames as well around it as well, and making it look like it's just, sort of leans a little bit more to traditional in a sense of just painting in the center of the canvas, not right up to the edges, and having that kind of rough frame to it, and leaving the sky the same color as the background. I really enjoy, because you don't end up with a square as such. You just allow the sky just to fade out, and it also rolls all the way around the sides and into the frame at the bottom. So
really nice.
I really like this one. This year, I know I've lent a lot more into creating kind of what I would refer to as quite loose kind of paintings, in a sense of not letting go of defined shapes in terms of like really solid, and letting brushes be a bit messier and allowing certain elements of it to be a lot looser. But my mindset being looser going into it, that chuck some color in, see how it goes. You don't need to stress about it. You can always come back to it and change it later on as well. So yeah, that's very much on point with everything I've kind of been releasing this year, which has been nice.
I think it's the contrasting colours is really nice. You've got the cool and the warm colours, and the almost like a dappled light. I know that it's a misty environment, but there's somehow a way that the light is kind of playing on the foreground rocks that just looks really pleasing. It's a really nice overall effect, and I think it's a beautiful scene. Very, very nice.
Thank you. So yeah, that one's out on Patreon tomorrow, but for everybody else watching is already out. I'll leave links to all of our tutorials as well in the description down below if you want to go and check out any of them. Of course, they will be linked. Mm-hmm. Now, let's get into the main sort of topic, because we never normally necessarily get too many press articles as such from Procreate. So when we've got one, we've got to jump on it because it's brand new content. It affects us and it affects our audience. So we've got a lovely little Procreate 5.4 roadmap update. Now, I've got the article in front of me, and we're going to just run through a lot of the topics, give our opinions potentially if there's anything to discuss. Now, I'm quite smug in a sense, because I did a Procreate 5.4 ? Video a while back, and there was a few things in there that have made it to the list. So if I'm due some cash from Procreate, I'll give you my bank details. You can send that my way. But let's get straight into it. So there's a major update coming for Procreate on every supported iPad. So it won't just be certain iPads like M4s or etc. It should be every iPad, which will focus primarily on tools such as your brushes. Now, the first point here we've got is brush libraries, introducing another level to organize your brushes. You can have multiple brush libraries and you can back them up and share them. And we're also working on an all new improved Procreate brush library. So what that says to me, at the minute, we've got brushes that go into essentially, let's call them folders, and then you have the brush library as a whole. To me, this obviously means that we've got brush inside a category, and then we've got another kind of hierarchy of category again. So here you should, for example, be able to create a JoelCreate library, and then in the JoelCreate library have a category for if I release a set of brushes for a certain tutorial, all in there, and then go into there and see the brushes inside it. So you end up with an extra tier above, which should give you a lot more possibilities with organizing content. It will be interesting to see how that's implemented, but that's just a quality of life one, really, isn't it? Just trying to keep things a little bit organized, give people a bit more control over
how
what
much
they see.
I will necessarily. I mean, it's not one that excites me, to be honest. I mean, I tend to, because there is a recent brushes section, I believe, anyway, isn't there? And you know, there's already the ability to kind of organize it to some degree. I never do. I don't find it a great pain to really just flick between the different brush types and just find the brushes. I think because we use it probably so often, both of us, that I think it's just intuitive at this point. We know where all the brushes are. But I guess if you don't use it all the time, and you're not as sort of fluent in where to put things, then I guess maybe that would have benefit for some people. But yeah, it's not one that it excites me as such. But...
Fair enough. Yeah, I can't say it really excites me. No. They're just more options that you may or may not use potentially.
Yeah.
Up search. Now I can hear people absolutely crying with joy in the comments, because this is something that everybody's mentioned to me, that if they had a feature that they could add as a brush search. And at first I'm thinking, do we really need a brush search? But then when I think about it from a kind of a consumer of content instead, primarily one of our followers or subscribers, I can imagine that the library does, it really does fill up over time,
It's true.
with different people sharing. Even just one brush here and there, really can fill up. So having some way now to organize them, as well as then do a brush search as well, it's going to make life a whole lot easier. Yeah. And I'm now thinking about it from a user point of view, going back to the library's point, that I guess now, in a sense, that hypothetically, if they did your tutorial and it's tutorial number, I imagine 503, whatever, that you've released, then it would be, they could create a folder now. So have a James Julier library, a folder called tutorial 504. And then in there, if you adapted, say, certain elements such as the rainforest brush and so on, they could, rather than reset it back to what it was, duplicate it with all the changes and move it into a folder.
Sure.
And then be able to basically jump back to all of the brushes that they used in just that tutorial, I guess. But it's not something necessarily you couldn't do now, but definitely is something that they could give more options for people consuming the content.
Yep.
Brush libraries is up next. This is a really cool one. So, brush synchronization with iCloud. So brush libraries can be synced on iCloud and shared with Procreate Dreams. You'll also be able to manage your brushes in the Files app. This is very cool and very interesting because, of course, if you didn't already know, if you download a new if you get a new iPad and you download Procreate, a backup of it, your brushes, I believe, do not currently move across. Well, they obviously can't at the minute. So you would end up having to manually move a few across one by one into the new one. Currently, I believe you can also back up Procreate using iCloud anyway, in terms of your canvases. So this is just that next step of making it more of a full backup to iCloud to make sure that you have all your content when you switch between devices. And I guess this type of update really comes with like longevity of the app. You wouldn't see it necessarily sort of early on as a feature you would need until a lot of people have upgraded their iPads and go, why do I not get my brushes come across with me? Why do I need to move them all one by one? And it makes perfect sense. So, and that would have helped you, of course, at the start of, the middle of this year when you got your new iPad.
I still haven't transferred the things from Procreate. It kind of started thinking and said it was going to take like 20 hours to do it for everything on my iPad. So I gave up on it and did the essentials. But yeah, I'm still not transferred all of my old artwork from Procreate to the new Procreate. So I've still got the old iPad, which I've yet to sell. So yeah, I'm not very organized, as we've discussed at length. So yeah, but let's move on.
But the second part of that's really interesting is you'll also be able to manage the brushes in the Files app. So that tells me a bit like when you go onto desktop with Photoshop, for example, you can dive into Photoshop's kind of file library, and then you can go ahead from there and drag and drop stuff in. So there could be a way of you downloading something on your iPad and it saves obviously to your files, but you just, rather than go into Procreate and import it in, you could just drag and drop it into the files manager of the app. So that could speed things up quite a lot, and also kind of give it that, I guess, a little bit of that Photoshop kind of feel in terms of professionalism of being able to, kind of deal with things a bit more in the back end rather than sort of directly and only within the app.
Yeah.
Moving on to the next one, which is new brush settings. We're working on some new brush settings in the Brush Studio that create more precise control and exciting new possibilities. What that means,
pretty vague, really, isn't it?
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see what they mean by that. Which, we know is probably not going to have any AI in it. Sorry, guys, I had to say it. We had to we had to just drop AI in once this week, but we'll move on.
I wonder what precise control is. Sorry, just hover on that a moment. To create more precise control, what would that be? I struggle to think in what ways it's not currently precise. It's a very particular word to use, isn't it? I wonder what that would mean.
I wonder if it's maybe more accessibility features. Of course, you've got streamline, and then you can take that a step further with stabilization. And I wonder if there's potentially anything else in there to, more of an accessibility feature rather than like a feature to the brush itself. But then when they word it the way they've done and exciting new possibilities, it could be something we've not considered.
It could be barrel roll. It could be factors like that where I don't know how it would be for everyone, but I guess they haven't necessarily converted all of their brushes to incorporate the barrel roll feature. So it could
Very
be,
true.
in terms of precise control, that would make me think somehow something you're doing with it that would react differently. So perhaps they're referring to changes for that, the Apple Pencil Pro.
Yeah, I wish we had a little more to go off of that one. I
Mm.
think, to be honest, just to give us an idea as to where they're going with it. Um, so we might as well move on. We'll move on to the next one, which is improvements to brush updating. So people often make changes to the included Procreate brushes and find it disruptive when they are suddenly updated. We're improving this system and giving you more control. So what that would mean is that if you make a change to the rainforest brush and you leave it as the changes have been applied, if they were to update the rainforest brush just directly in Procreate, it means that your brush that you use in your design would probably been reset back to normal because they've had to kind of overwrite it with the new version of whatever they've changed in the rainforest brush. So hopefully this will give people either a pop-up or some sort to say, do you want to update this or keep it as it is? Or it'd be ideal if it did that and then had a second option to be like, no, but introduce as new brush, as like an extra brush. So if they make a new rainforest brush, let's just call it V2, it wouldn't overwrite yours. It would just drop in a new rainforest V2 underneath so that you have the two of them. Because otherwise you could potentially miss out on some quite dramatic features if they'd made any changes to
I mean,
the
it
brush.
makes me slightly nervous. I don't want them to change the current brushes in any way, because they're so much a part of our historic workflow, that if people are following our old tutorials, I don't want them to mess with the current brushes to make them fundamentally different in any way. I kind of want them to remain and just add to them. I mean, is there anything here that mentions new brushes coming? I thought when I first sort of scanned it that I saw something referring to a larger brush set. But now I'm
I've not
rereading it
seen.
and I feel like I must have misread that.
Yeah, I don't think I've seen anything. I remember seeing them have an article on the website about bringing on a brush designer that we've previously spoken about in a previous
Yeah.
episode. So whether or not they're just not mentioning it here as to what we might get, but potentially that work is yet to be seen necessarily of his content coming into the app. So maybe that could be an extra little cherry on top. It now says about going beyond 5.4. So 5.4 is quite heavily sort of brush based. And when I first read this, I thought that all of it was combined into one, but now rereading it, 5.4 is up to what we've just read, really.
Yeah.
And then this is what they're then planning for the future of Procreate. So we don't know when 5.4 is coming up with all of those brush updates. You'd hope this year, fairly soon, would be awesome.
I feel it must be fairly soon for them to even mention it. Yeah.
Yeah, but I must admit the Beyond 5.4 is still the most interesting for me out of all of the updates, because these are core changes to the app that will really expand its possibilities way beyond what it can currently do. And that is not an exaggeration necessarily either. So just reading here, the main focus of the main focus of the following major update will be bringing the new painting engine and file format for Procreate. So at the minute, Dreams has a slightly different engine that Procreate has with a number of features. So they will be brought across. And they were always saying that they were going to do this because they said it in the Procreate Dreams actually in the event. All of the effort we're putting in this year for selections and transforming Procreate Dreams brings us closer. We've also been working hard to make sure that when the new painting engine is introduced into Procreate, God, that was a real fumble. That painting is amazing at every zoom level, and to me, that is a very subtle kind of potential lean towards: are we going to change the engine to the point where it's vectorized, or are we changing it? Are we keeping it as a pixel based? Because as an actual function of zooming in, if it's pixel based, should most of the time always pixelate. It's just what it's made of. It's constructed of pixels. So if you vectorize it, you won't have that issue. So are they hinting at potentially adjusting the whole engine flow and how it all works, but it would just be vectorized going forward. Yeah, it was massively interesting. So we've got a few bullet points here just to follow up. The new engine and file format, which is the Dreams format that we've previously spoken about, will allow us to add some highly requested features, including iCloud synchronization, so file sync, undo history in the actual file. So you could currently, if you close a file and then come back to it and you realize I actually made a mistake, you can't undo. It's simply whatever state it was left in if you leave the canvas. The next one is layers larger than the canvas, which is really cool because, of course, in Dreams you can do this at the minute from a bit more of a kind of animation kind of view. It makes more sense, doesn't it, to have a repeating long scene that comes across the scene.
Things off camera.
You need it to be able to come into scene. So how that will play in Procreate, I don't really know, but I guess it's something I've got personally used to. I don't know about yourself, that when you make a layer and you go right up to the edge, you know it's not going beyond that. It's only
cropped it, isn't it?
The canvas.
Yeah.
Which causes problems if you want to make a layer slightly bigger or smaller, well, mainly smaller, because if it's cropped to the edges of the square, you make it smaller, you've got a empty void of space around the edge. So
I can see that being useful, because sometimes if you're playing around with a texture, you'll put it in one position. And like you say, if you want to shrink it or move it, and you reveal the gaps where you've just saved it at that edge. That is one thing where I can see that being actually pretty useful. I have encountered that and found it irritating. So yeah, I think that could actually be a good if they implement it in the way we imagine. Yeah.
Have you used Dreams at all?
No.
No. So it's really interesting to actually use because it already has this concept in there, like layers larger than the canvas. And you see like a highlighted area in the middle, that's where your canvas is, and that's the kind of that's the shot and the 16:9 or whatever ratio you pick, and you can see the stuff outside, but it's like got this kind of like dark tint over it to know that it's not in the focal like area, which is essentially your canvas. And it's already in there now. So if people have got Dreams, I haven't opened it in a while, you can actually kind of get an idea for the sort of feature set right now in Dreams. It's interesting how it looks.
I think they do that on movie sets, don't you? When you see like the cameras and the monitors, it shows you like the letterbox sort of what is actually on screen, but then it shows you what's just outside on the peripheral. I guess that's similar to the Procreate Dream. I don't know how you would incorporate that visually within Procreate. I'm guessing it probably wouldn't be formatted like that. It's very specific to movie, isn't it, or to animation, perhaps in that case. But it would be interesting if it did allow you to see beyond the edges. I can't see that it would be useful that often for it to reduce the canvas size on screen. It would feel like a big sacrifice, wouldn't it? But
from our tutorials, it would look bloody awful, because if you go right to the edge now, it does the job for you. You're right up to the edge and that's it. But if you can see the excess around the edges, do we have to now start to think about keeping things nice and tidy? Like if you could have the feature to kind of say, do we want to see the preview or not? Like I'm happy for the content to remain there slightly off screen, like Photoshop, you don't see it. But if I drag the layer to the left-hand side, it will bring in that data that's off screen. So that would be a better use case, I think, in Procreate as a drawing app, in my opinion. Next one, though, is huge resolutions. We're talking 1 million by 1 million pixels. I can't wait to feel how hot some people's iPads get, especially mine, when they try to burn through 1 million pixels. It is what it is. I don't really think anything of this one, really, in terms of an update. Any thoughts or feelings on that one?
I guess there are some people that think that, I guess an image that size, it depends what you want to do with it. I guess if you're printing it to a bus, but even then, they're meant to be viewed from a distance, aren't they? So that level of ridiculous, hyper, maybe. I don't know what the average, it's like 1 million by 1 million pixels. I mean, that's way beyond any TV, isn't it? Or any monitor is capable of actually representing. So it's an odd concept, but yeah.
And that it's not even like they're saying a million pixel canvas. It's 1 million
By a
by
million.
1 million pixels. Like,
Yeah.
that's crazy. Like, for context, like you're saying, like a TV at 1080p is 1080 by 1920.
Yeah.
So, we are a massive amount of pixels over that. And then 4K is 3,600, I think, by 2,160,
Right,
something along those lines. So you're still miles off. The only thing I can kind of think with this one is it might open up the availability of, because it's not vectorized.
Yes.
You can kind of get around that by saying, well, actually, my canvas is absolutely enormous.
It may as well be vector at that point, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. If you blow this up to even bigger, it can handle it because it was already drawn at that scale anyway.
Yeah.
The final one is more layers, which is just great for people who are maybe just getting into Procreate, especially, and on maybe sort of slightly older devices. It's going to open up a lot more possibilities for people to, really dig deep if they haven't had the opportunity yet. Because I know some people with slightly older iPads are quite limited if we make our canvases slightly too big.
Would that mean that people with the older iPads and less RAM would be able to take advantage of that? Do you think? Do you think that's what it means?
I believe so, because it's the architecture is changing in a sense that it's not It's not utilizing RAM anymore. It's in the Dreams file type.
Right.
So the file type is storing the data. How sluggish maybe it might feel if you're just it might be able to handle it. And to be honest, I think we're maybe talking about quite older devices than we probably realize in terms of like which ones really do struggle in that kind of space. Because a lot of the new ones, even like base iPad right now, has a huge capacity of layers. So if you take off 10 a year going backwards, it still gives you, it's still going back quite a far way. But yeah, hopefully there'll be a part of the audience though that can make use of that in some of their work that they've not had the opportunity to do so just yet. In terms of how that changes my concepts of my work, I don't think it changes anything in terms of my workflow and me thinking, well, actually, now we could add another 50 layers in here if everybody's up for it. But, no one wants to sit through another 5 hours of it. So, but they're all quality of life. And I think they all, to a degree, serve a particular purpose and a particular person's issue potentially. Quality of life is definitely the summary, I would say, of that. Now, just those beyond 5.4 points that we were just talking about, iCloud sync, undo history in the file type, larger layers, huge resolutions, and more layers. They have mentioned here that there is much more that will allow. There is so much more that will allow the possible. Let's do that again, shall we? There's so much more that will now be possible, and we'll share more on this release next year. So all of those big quality of life things are still in the works. May not get them for a while. Potentially, if there's an iPad event again next year towards the earlier stages, which I believe, was it May this year that we saw that?
I think so, yeah. I've lost track of time now, yeah. I think, it's been a good few months, isn't it now?
Yeah, so maybe around May time, it could nicely tie in with the Apple event and, to a degree showing how capable the new iPad is. But at the same time, these software updates are available to everybody on all iPads. Yeah. So yeah, I think that looks like the roadmap to me in terms of the further 5.4 updates. We've spoken about previously, things that we think we would like in the app, and I don't think we ever really sort of went down any of these routes that they've got here for a lot of the content.
I'm hoping it's the case of they're giving us things that we didn't know we needed in our lives, because that is often the case, and that's often the case with Apple. I've noticed in the past, that they give you things that you think, well, why on earth would I want that? And then suddenly it just becomes incredibly important in your life. I remember when the iPad was first announced, and I thought, well, what the hell do we want that for? And now it's such an integral part of almost everything that I do. So it could be that these sort of foundational changes within the app just enable us to do way more. And I think that perhaps they're just making sure that Procreate is ever more open for that pro and professional use case. It's no Adobe Photoshop. It doesn't have the breadth of tools and features. But the more they do things like this, and like you say, if it allows someone to produce vector-like images, for example, which, you know, a lot of professionals really would need it to be vectors, you know, for branding and professional use case, then it might just open the doors for more and more people to use it, and not just, you know, people like us.
I
I don't know
think
how we
the
categorize,
iClouds.
but yeah.
Yeah. I think the iCloud stuff is probably the nicest quality of life there for me. Just like, it makes total sense that you move everything across to the next iPad and not have to think about it. Have it in your backups of, you know, what's happening on your iCloud every night potentially when you back up your iPad. It should be in there. It should be part of the whole bundle that is Procreate: brushes, palettes, canvases, and even better, having the undo history there as well. It does make me think to an extent after this, and this is where the imagination of developers comes in and creatives. Is the ceiling? Are we at the ceiling? Is there anything beyond this that we could think of that we want? And I guess, like you say, we kind of rely on those creatives and developers to tell us that actually we've been missing this our entire lives, and this is the best thing that has ever come to the app. So, but to a degree, I think when I start to see companies do quality of life things more so, I don't see a lot of future change coming that's dramatic or of quite a large, substantial, you know, amount of updates. Only because that's part of my job on a daily basis. So once I see people doing that, I go, okay, I see what you're doing now. It's more about quality of the product as such, not introducing new feature after new feature after new feature.
I think it depends. I think that things can build up in subtle, you know, just fine tuning, and then suddenly there's another leap forward, isn't there? And it's impossible to predict at this point what that could be. I think it would be reliant, perhaps, upon Apple, in terms of what they're able to come up with, you know, new developments with the Apple Pencil. I think with the current technology of the iPad and the Apple Pencil, I think we're reaching kind of the peak of what Procreate. I don't know. The way we understand it, I think we're reaching towards the peak of what Procreate is capable of, without embracing AI and other things. You know, if it's going to stick rigidly to the traditional human-made approach that tries to replicate as much as it can a kind of almost traditional approach of pencils and pens and brushes, then it does a pretty good job, doesn't it? And we're not sponsored.
Oh yeah.
You know, we're not here for any other reason other than just a genuine, sincere love of the app and what it allows us to do, really. I'm a huge advocate for Procreate. I think that, you know, it's an amazing app. You know, I wish they would sponsor me, I have to say. You know, but, you know, whatever. They don't need to, do they?
You've got to
That's the point.
manifest.
Yeah, they don't
You've got
need
to manifest. You got to put it out there. Maybe when there's another Apple update, you'll be on stage. Hopefully, I'll get a ticket to come by as well. But yeah, maybe they'll drag you up on stage.
I think the truth of it is that they don't need to, because we're happy to bang on about how wonderful they are anyway. You know, if they started paying us, then people wouldn't believe us as much, would they? So, you know,
That's true.
But I think we've proved between us the value of Procreate, and not just between us, but, you know, there's tons of people on YouTube teaching on Procreate. But, you know, I think we've added a good chunk of, you know, value to the app. I think a lot of people buy the iPad for Procreate, and they buy the Procreate app so they can follow tutorials and create artwork, don't they? So
100%. And I think that comes a little bit, as you kind of said, like maybe from a little bit. I'm not trying to say me and James and everybody else in the Procreate space sell iPads for Apple. You know, that's not how it works. But what I'm saying is that, for example, I can even, I've got use cases of my friends who have actually said, you know, they bought an iPad to do my content, and then they saw that my friend was then drawing on their iPad and got their own as well to do some drawing, based on the fact that it's seen some of my content. So, you know, and how far that stretches beyond just me and you. You know, I've heard people say that my video, have been played on occasions in classrooms, which is just, I mean, it's a huge compliment to the content we make, and I can guarantee that there's so many places that we've never seen our content be used, but it has been for educational purposes, such as teaching in a classroom, whether it's 30 students all using an iPad and an Apple Pencil in the classroom as well. So yeah, 100% that the creators have definitely it definitely helped the app quite a bit. I mean, it's like games, isn't it? So like there's a lot of games at the minute, like console games and PC games that are dying in a sense very quickly because the content creators don't get on board with it. And if they've not got, 60 to 80,000 people watching every single day, that game, it just doesn't carry on anymore. And if with us, you've got people creating content all the time, I can hear members of our audience previously that have said to us that like, I'm really struggling to come up with my own ideas, that if those tutorials weren't there, would it just be, I've got no ideas, so I'll just put it down and come back to it, rather than saying, actually there's a tutorial I could do, maybe that'll crack on with some inspiration and creativity. It's one of the no, you carry on.
There was something that annoyed me that I don't know that we're going off a bit of a tangent here with this one. I've not discussed it with you previously, but there was somebody who was a huge AI enthusiast, clearly, who started really being quite, cranky in the comments section of one of our posts, and saying that people that use Procreate are just, amateurs and not very professional, and so I knew that you you would definitely remember that one.
Well, I don't know if you. So I was responding to this guy, and I didn't know whether or not you'd gone right. Let's just nip that in the bud, and I'll just delete it, and I'll just tell Joel later on. And I was like, fine,
I didn't do it. No,
no, that's so now. Now I'm assuming it's him who's now gone ahead and gone. Yeah, do you know what? I randomly decided to have an outburst on a podcast clip that I don't even watch because I don't even play with Procreate, and I just decided to vent at the world. And I must admit, we are not footballers that have got to watch what they say or anything like that. And I'm not saying that me and James just hurt and abuse at people online just for a laugh or just in response.
People come at us, then it's different.
People will come at us, and I think sometimes they necessarily don't expect a response. I cannot even remember what he said, to be honest. It was something about that. It's something that Procreate users, based on the last statement that the Procreate CEO released, saying that Procreate users are forever behind the times and a different type of breed, kind of sort of putting down Procreate users in a sense and saying, it's not for professionals anyway, kind of thing. And I just thought, I looked at his page and he made a lot of 3D renders. I'm like, dude, why are you in this space? Like,
I mean, it's fine. I think it's okay to be in that field. I'm not hugely behind sort of generative AI, but it's fine if that's the world of hyper realistic and you think that the future is going to embrace AI in various ways. That's fine. It's not what Procreate has ever been for, really. Procreate is about embracing the humanness, isn't it? The human touch in things and not perfection. It's about the flaws and the hand created feel of things. And you just, that particular individual, we're giving him far too much attention and airtime. But the fact that they just didn't get that, struck me, and just quite insulting to all of our audience, to us personally, to say that anyone that uses Procreate is kind of, doomed to be irrelevant, I think was the word, or something, in the future. Which just struck me as rather arrogant. And I think actually, I think Procreate, I think the tutorials we do, I think it's a wonderful app. I think that professionals do use it. David Hockney is a professional, famous artist who uses the iPad. I think he uses Procreate. And, I'm not necessarily a fan of the work that he does on the iPad, but it's just a tool. And I think it's broad and complex enough, and it probably reflects the skill that you have, what you bring to it, and I think you can make it into amazing images. If the tool isn't strong, isn't powerful enough, you're blaming the tools basically, then it says a lot about you as an artist, I think, doesn't it? I think Procreate is a brilliant tool. So There you go.
That was a very lovely PR kind of trained run around back to a nice positive point to wrap up. I really loved that. That was very professional of you. Well done. So we'll leave it at that. I'll zip up from this point, guys. If you're enjoying the show, we are trying to hit 1,000 subscribers by Halloween. So
not that far
it's
away.
Not that far away at all. So if you're enjoying the show, the best way to support it would be to subscribe to the show down below. There's also links to our socials as well. There's a form where you could submit a question if you'd like us to answer something in particular on the show. James, thank you as always for a great conversation. I'm looking forward to these 5.4 updates now as a collective. I've been rereading them as we've been talking, and I'm now thinking actually they'll bundle together and be really nice. Anyway, we'll wrap it at there. We'll see you, should I say, next week.